Hello and welcome to Torah portion Ki Teitzei. In this Torah portion, we're going to learn some more of Yahovah's Mishpatim. When I'm thinking of the Torah portions as they come up, I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to address in this one, kind of broadly what it's about. I think of Ki Teitzei as Mishpatim Part 2. It's very similar to me to Mishpatim. Perhaps it's the retelling of Yahovah's Mishpatim. We know this is Moshe giving the law for a second time. There are a number of laws in this that we're not told of the first time when Yahovah gives them to Moshe, so they appear to be new at this point, but of course they're not new. This is Moshe saying what Yahovah has told him. So rather than them being reiterated, us having them recorded twice in the Torah, we have them recorded once, and you could speculate about why that might be. Maybe the other laws need two perspectives on them to give you the whole law. They need to be told in two different ways. It probably isn't that, but you could speculate as to why it might be. There are laws in this that people misapprehend what is being said, because when people look at the Torah, sometimes they kind of see it through their own fallen mind, like when they say, well, the word of God will or approves taking women as sex slaves. Of course, it doesn't. It's just kind of like a really bizarre, fallen way of looking at Yahovah saying, take the women when you conquer their lands. Take the women. How Yahovah means it is that you will take them in, not that you will take them captive. If it says take them as wife, it's not saying do so to them involuntarily. But people view his law in a strange way. That makes me think of when you tell people who follow the man-made religion of Christianity that we are to follow the law of God. They have a very skewed way of looking at it sometimes, and that can put them in a couple of different positions with Yahovah. If they accurately understand the law and they say, oh no, we don't have anything to do with that, then that's one way that they could be before Yahovah. But if they misunderstand the law and they think that the law is saying to do something that otherwise Yahovah would forbid, that would be immoral, scripturally speaking, then that's a different thing, isn't it? If you think the law tells you to take women as sex slaves and you say, well, I don't want anything to do with that law, that's different from saying, well, the law requires me to not work on the Sabbath and I'm not prepared to do that, so I reject the Torah. So these laws, just like the laws in Mishpatim, and when I say laws, I'm just using a collective noun to refer to all of the commands in the Torah, basically all the things that you're told, the statutes, the Mishpatim, whatever it might be, various forms of laws. But these laws, just like Mishpatim, tell us who Yahovah is. So a rejection of them, prima facie, which just means on the face, is a rejection of who Yahovah actually is. So as I say, I think of this Torah portion as Mishpatim Part 2. So if you haven't seen Mishpatim from this year, I would recommend watching that video. I would advised to not have kind of the mindset we often have when it comes to watching videos. You know, sometimes I'll watch videos on YouTube and they'll say, go back and watch this one because this is the second part. With the word of Elohim, it's incumbent upon us to do it, because what you're talking about is having a full understanding of part of the word of Elohim. It's not just like a collector mindset of go and watch all the ones in the series. But Charlie went over the justices of Yahovah, the Mishpatim of Yahovah in this. I very much see this as a part of this video, Mishpatim, as a part of what we're looking at here. We're going to see laws that you can apply not only in the way that they are written, but in other situations as well. And Charlie covered some of the dangers of doing that if you apply things almost too liberally, if you apply them to situations that they don't apply to. But I think that we can all see that if the Torah says, if you own an ox and it gores somebody else, if you knew about it beforehand, then you pay a penalty for that. We can all see that that would apply to, say, a dangerous dog or anything that you might be in possession of that might end up killing someone and you knew that it was dangerous. You can apply it to those other situations, but I would recommend this Torah portion so you can see the dangers of doing that too liberally, being too open to applying the word to things to which it really doesn't apply. I mentioned the last Torah portion that I did, Torah portion A, I mentioned about the pagan mourning rituals of shaving one's head for the dead. And I said the reason that we're not allowed to do it is that we are set apart to Yahovah. But this Torah portion actually opens with a law that mandates that we allow the Gentiles to do something which we are not allowed to do. Verse 10 of Deuteronomy 21 says, when you go out to fight against your enemies, and Yahovah your Elohim has given them into your hand, and you have taken them captive, and have seen among the captives a woman fair of form, and have delighted in her and taken her for your wife, then you have brought her home to your house, and she has shaved her head, and trimmed her nails, put aside the raiment of her captivity, and has dwelt in your house, and mourned her father and mother a moon of days. And after that you do go in to her, and have married her, and she has been your wife. So people from a fallen mindset, as I say, look at laws like this, and they say, well, if you see a woman that you fancy, you're supposed to take her, thinking taking her by force, and bring her to your house. Doesn't really accurately reflect what is being said here. You notice that in verse 13 here it talks about the raiment of her captivity. So what this is talking about is the things that she has put on when she was taken captive. It would be when women were taken captive after all the men were killed. Maybe they would beautify themselves to appear attractive so that they weren't just killed as they would have been by other nations or, whatever. Here we have Yahovah telling Israel how they are to be. So the mention of the raiment of her captivity is important here. It says, if you've seen among the captives a woman fair of form, so you see her and you fancy this woman, you're attracted to her, she's put on beautiful garb, then you don't immediately take her to be your wife. Okay, you might take her into your house with the intention of being betrothed to her, and then she could be spoken of as your wife, as we see elsewhere in the scriptures. But what you are to do, it says here, you brought her home to your house, and she has shaved her head. So we're told specifically to allow the Gentiles to do those things which they do in mourning. Okay, and we see here it is to do with mourning. She's dwelt in your house, and she has mourned her father. And how long? Is it a chodesh of days? No, it's a moon of days. Again, things which were pagan. Okay, the way that the pagans reckon time, a moon of days. So she dwells for an entire moon of days in your house, and she's weepy, she's shaved her head. So if you see a woman that you are attracted to among the captives, you have to wait for this period of time before you take her as wife, before you marry her. So this is actually very different from how people might apprehend this law. But you can see how people, in the innocency of their heart, might misunderstand the Torah coming from a modern perspective on these things. People might see these things quite different to how the Israelites would have seen these in a more ancient world. But if someone, as I say, accurately apprehends these things in the Torah and still rejects them and says, no, these things are no good, I will not do them, then that is a rejection of Yahovah. So the Gentiles are different from Israel. We should know that just in the fact that Israel are supposed to be set apart from the Gentiles. You can't be set apart from something that you are the same as. But this brings us to an interesting idea of the laws that are given to us to make us set apart. If the Gentiles don't follow them, are they sinning before Yahovah? So think eating clean and unclean food, or clean and unclean animals, things that men might count as food that are unclean. Think of the Sabbath day. Is it sin for someone who hasn't entered into covenant with Yahovah to do the things that Israel, or not do the things that Israel are supposed to do? We can see here it is within the Torah that we are commanded to allow the Gentiles their way of life. That, we're not to insist upon them Yahovah's way of doing things. And that's may be important for you to consider if you've got a family who are not a part of Israel. They haven't been grafted into Israel. And you're imposing on them that they must not work on the Sabbath day. Really, they've got no business being involved in that command. And you certainly have no business enforcing that upon them. We see here we're to allow the Gentiles their way of doing things. We're actually commanded to do that. It would be sin for us to not do that, for us to transgress the Torah in that way. In Deuteronomy 14:1-2, it says, "Do not cut yourselves, nor shave the front of your head for the dead," as we saw in Torah portion Re'eh. "For you are a set-apart people." Okay, that's why. That's the reasoning, because you're a set-apart people to Yahovah, your Elohim. And Yahovah has chosen you to be a people for himself, a treasured possession above all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. So the other people who are on the face of the earth, this is not commanded to, because they're not a set-apart people. Yahovah hasn't chosen them to be a people for himself. And we see as we've been looking at, that Yahovah has commanded us to allow, in fact, the Gentiles to go about things in their own way. Deuteronomy 14:21 says, "Do not eat whatever dies of itself. Give it to the stranger who is within your gates to eat it, or sell it to a foreigner, for you are a set-apart people to Yahovah, your Elohim." So we've looked at this command before and considered whether or not it is good to give them food which is not good to eat, just because it is allowed in the Torah. Perhaps Yahovah would judge one's heart in that, but we can see from it also that set-apart people cannot do a certain thing, but the Gentiles can do that thing. It is permitted for them to do that thing. It is not against the Torah, whereas it would be for us. Exodus 22:31 says, "And you are set apart men to me, and do not eat any meat which is torn to pieces in the field. You throw it to the dogs." Okay, and maybe most likely that's talking about the actual physical dogs, like real dogs, canines. But dogs was also a term that was used of the Gentiles. So when it says here, "Whatever dies of itself, give it to the Gentiles," we have something very similar when it says, "If you find something torn to pieces in the field, throw it to the dogs." Again, I think it's probably talking about canines, but it could be talking about the Gentiles. Exodus 31 verse 13 says, "And you speak to the children of Israel, saying, My Sabbaths you are to cherish by all means, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, to know that I, Yahovah, am setting you apart." So what is it? It's a sign between me and you. Who is the you? The children of Israel. So are the Gentiles sinning by not keeping the Sabbath? No, it is not commanded to them to keep the Sabbath. Does that mean that you can go into a business on the Sabbath and have the Gentiles work for you? Well, no, you can't, because part of the command to us is to have nobody do any work for us. And we see the buying and selling of the Gentiles is something which is spoken against in Scripture on the Sabbath day. Think of when they were bringing the goods, the markets, to the walls of Jerusalem. That was not permitted for Judah to go and buy from the Gentiles on the Sabbath day. But the point being, the Gentiles are not sinning by eating that which the children of Israel are forbidden from eating. And again, it's because we are set apart from them. In order for that to be true, then the things that they do must be different from the things that we do. Those commands make us distinct. They make us the ones that Yahovah has chosen. And as the people, prospective people that Yahovah has chosen, if we are making that our goal, then we have things that we must follow. But I do think it's absolutely incumbent upon us to remember that if we have Gentile friends or we have Gentile family, to impose the things on them which are laws to us is not scriptural. Ezekiel 20:10-12 says, "So I took them out of the land of Mitzrayim, and I brought them into the wilderness. And I gave them my laws and showed them my judgments, which if a man does, he shall live by them. And I also gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between them and me, to know that I am Yahovah, who sets them apart." So it's a sign so that we know that we're set apart from the people. It's obviously not a law that applies to people who are not set apart. It would be impossible. Leviticus 11:43-45 says, "Do not make yourselves abominable with any creeping creature that creeps. Do not make yourselves unclean with them, lest you be defiled by them. For I am Yahovah your Elohim, you have set yourselves apart, and you have been set apart, for I am set apart. Do not defile yourselves with any unclean creature that creeps upon the earth. For I am Yahovah who is bringing you up out of the land of Egypt to be your Elohim, and you have been set apart, for I am set apart." So it says here, to be your Elohim, and you have been set apart. You have set yourselves apart, in fact, in following those instructions. You set yourselves apart. You set yourselves apart, and you have been set apart because Yahovah is set apart. So again, it's all about being different. These things make us different. They are requirements of Yahovah's set apart or holy people. Leviticus 21:4-6 says, "A leader does not defile himself among his people to profane himself. They do not make any bald place on their heads, and they do not shave the corner of their beard, and they do not make a cutting in their flesh, for they are set apart to their Elohim, and do not profane the name of their Elohim, for they bring the offerings of Yahovah made by fire, and the bread of their Elohim, and have been set apart." So this is speaking, of course, of the leaders, the priests, and it's the same things are true of the leaders. They are not to do these things because they are set apart to their Elohim, just as we are set apart. Because they've been set apart by Yahovah, he said, "These people are mine, they're different." He's given them commandments. Numbers 6:2-5 says, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when a man or woman does separate by making a vow of a Nazarite to be separate to Yahovah, he separates himself from wine and strong drink. He drinks neither vinegar of wine nor vinegar of strong drink, neither does he drink any grape juice, nor eat grapes or raisins. All the days of his separation he does not eat whatever is made of the grapevine from seed to skin. All the days of the vow of his separation a razor does not come upon his head, until the days are completed for which he does separate himself to Yahovah. He is set apart, he has let the locks of the hair of his head grow long." So this shows us a little bit about being holy. Being holy is to be set apart, it's to be separate. That's what the word kadosh means. Here we have a way in which those people who are already set apart can separate themselves from even Yehovah's people. The way that they do it, they don't have any products of the grapevine, so no raisins, no wine, no grape juice, and also they let the locks of their hair grow long, because usually one would not have long hair. As Paul says, it is a shame for a man to have long hair. But if you want to separate yourself from Yehovah's people, you can do so by taking this vow and by letting your hair grow long, and by not partaking of certain things. So even among those who are set apart, who eat a set apart diet, even among them, there is a way to distinguish yourself further for a period of time and restrict the food that you eat. You see from this that this is a part of how Yahovah sees separating oneself. It's seen in the Nazarite as an extreme example of the set apart, the Holy of Holies, if you like. And we see it just as his people, his standard children of Israel people. They are set apart by the things that they eat also. In Numbers 15, 37 and 41, it says, And Yahovah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and you have said to them to make zitziot on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and to put a cord of blue in the zitzit of the corners. And it has been to you for a zitzit, and you have seen it, and you have remembered all the commands of Yahovah, and done them, and not searched after your own heart and your own eyes, after which you went whoring. So that you remember and have done all my commands, and been set apart unto your Elohim. I'm Yahovah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, to be your Elohim. I am Yahovah your Elohim. So wearing tzitzit with the cord of blue in them is something which sets us apart. Therefore, it's not sin that the Gentiles don't wear tzitzit. I think we can kind of apprehend that easier. We can comprehend the fact that wearing tzitzit is not required of all people, but it is required if you are set apart to Yahovah. So ask yourself, am I wearing tzitzit at the moment? If you're not, simple process of confession of guilt. I should be doing this before Yahovah, and repentance. Put some tzitziot on. Leviticus 20, verse 22 to 26 says, And you have cherished all my laws and all my judgments and done them, and the land where I am bringing you to dwell does not vomit you out. And do not walk in the laws of the nations which I am driving out before you, for they do all these, and therefore I am grieved with them. But I say to you, you are going to possess their land, and I myself give it to you to possess it, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am Yahovah your Elohim, who has separated you from the peoples. And you have made a distinction between clean beasts and unclean, and between unclean birds and clean. And do not make yourselves abominable by beast or by bird or whatever creeps on the ground, which I have separated from you as unclean. And you shall be set apart to me, for I, Yahovah, am set apart, and I have separated you from the peoples to be mine. So Yahovah says, these people, different, this is how they walk. I have identified for you a better way. You have a way that is dictated to you by the King of the universe, the Elohim, who created the heavens and the earth. And he, as creator, has told you how he wants his creations to be his. In 1 Corinthians 5, 9 to 13, it says, I wrote to you in my letter not to keep company with those who fornicate. And I certainly did not mean with those of this world who fornicate, or with the greedy of gain, or swindlers, or idolaters, since then you would need to go out of the world. But now I have written to you not to keep company with anyone called a brother. That shouldn't be in inverted commas, that's an addition of the translators. Basically, it means anyone who is a brother. If he is one who fornicates or greedy of gain, or an idolater, or a reviler, or a drunkard, or a swindler, not even to eat with such a one. For what have I to do with judging outsiders? Do you not judge those who are inside? But Elohim judges those who are outside. Put away the wicked one from among you. So you should be concerned with people who are supposed to be separated to Yahovah, who don't do the commands. That should be a concern, and we should all admonish and help one another back onto the right path if we depart. But the world outside, we don't judge them. We don't start saying, you shouldn't be doing this. Even something like fornication, which would be sin for them to do. It would be against their own conscience. It would be sin for them to do. But even things like that, we don't judge people who are outside. And I think a lot of people, particularly, you think of people like the Westboro Baptist Church and extreme examples, but they have taken the word of Elohim, and instead of using it like a mirror to see where they're going wrong, they turn the mirror around at the world and say, look, the word of Elohim says that you're doing terrible things. Therefore, God hates you. That's not our business to be doing. The word is something for us. It's supposed to change us. We shouldn't use it to expose other people in their sin. We, of course, exhort and admonish one another within Israel as to what is right and what is wrong. And if somebody won't repent, then they are to be removed. The wicked person is to be removed from our midst, but we are to leave Elohim to judge those who are outside. In Deuteronomy 4:15-16 it says, therefore diligently guard yourselves, for you saw no form when Yahovah spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire, lest you should do corruptly, and have made for yourselves a carved image in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female. Unless you lift up your eyes to the heavens and see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of the heavens, and you shall be drawn away into bowing down to them and serving them, which Yahovah your Elohim has allotted to all the peoples. That's their lot under the heavens. But Yahovah has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be his people, an inheritance as it is today. And people don't really reckon with this correctly. And what I mean by that is they've had certain ways that they think of when it comes to spirituality. They might come from a spiritual background and have certain understandings of things. And when they come to Yahovah, they don't separate themselves from the ways of the pagans. It's spoken of here as them worshipping the sun and the moon and the stars, which is the way for those peoples that has been allotted to them by Yahovah. But, we've spoken before of things like the idea of everything happens for a reason. That's very much a pagan spirituality way of thinking of God and whatever else. Or looking at omens, seeing things as signs, that as a way that you should act. Those things again come from a very worldly spirituality. We are to divorce ourselves from those things. We're to be separate from them, and they can take the form of all sorts of different things. Think of your more traditional alternative health understandings. We are to be separate from those things. We may well have given credence to them originally, but now that we've come to the word of Elohim, we leave those sort of things behind. And you should be diligent to see the roots of the things which you have come to believe, whatever it might be, crystal healing or, whatever. If it's got pagan roots, as in spiritual roots, it comes from a spiritual understanding of things, even if people now have turned it and given it a pseudo-scientific explanation. If its roots come from a spiritual understanding that is not scriptural, then you should leave such things behind. Deuteronomy 7:5-6 says, but this is what you do to them. Break down their altars and smash their pillars, cut down their asherim, burn their carved images with fire. For you are a set-apart people to Yahovah your Elohim. Yahovah your Elohim has chosen you to be a people for himself, a treasured possession above all the peoples on the face of the earth. So whatever the spiritual practice is, might not be Asherim, might not be worshipping idols, might not be that obvious, but we are to leave all of the pagan ways of worshipping what they see as God. Many people worship the creation as God and natural things as God. You know, they think natural and chemical are differentiations that you can bring, but all things in the world are chemical. So you have to be precise by what you mean. Maybe you mean lab-made as opposed to naturally occurring. That is a distinction that you should draw. But most pharmaceutical drugs are actually extracts of, you know, herbs or whatever. That's the root. It was those kind of what we think of now as alternative health. They were the ways in which mechanisms of action were discovered. So people think, well, I'm moving away from chemical or unnatural things to a more natural way of healing. But because they don't have the understanding of the journey between those two things, actually what they're doing is moving away from a more effective way of using the same mechanism to a less effective one. But all of these things kind of come from like a paganistic, worshipping the creature rather than the creator way of looking at things. And, oh, we've got all the things in the trees and the herbs that we could possibly need. We don't need these things which are just more potent ways of doing exactly the same thing. There's a lot of misunderstanding. But what I'm saying is you should move away from things which come from kind of Mother Gaia worship originally, even if you don't say it like that. Don't think about whether or not those things come from that understanding of the world. You know, people look up to the Native Americans as if they've got some kind of amazing wisdom about the world. But actually, if you break that down, they've just got another form of spirituality. Their understanding of things often comes from an idea of the realm of the spirits and, you know, a worship of creation and of natural remedies, and the actual basis of it, the foundation of it, is spirituality rather than a sound understanding of the things that Yahovah has given us in creation. That's another thing that people do. They conflate those two things together. They conflate kind of a natural spirituality, if you like, with saying, well, these are the things that God has given us. And they kind of mash those two things together and mask what is actually has spiritual roots. They mask that with saying that it's actually a biblical understanding that these are the things that Yahovah has given us, and therefore these other forms of spirituality are actually correct. And then they put this biblical explanation over it. So just be careful with those things. Think about the things that you're into, the way in which you go about things. Think about whether you come to alternative health and you listen to pseudo-scientific explanations or explanations that you think are scientific, which you may or may not know are actually pseudo-scientific. Look into these things more foundationally. Try to understand what is actually being said about them and look into their origins to see whether or not they are good. In 1 Corinthians 10:14-22 it says, flee from idolatry. I speak as to wise men. Judge for yourselves what I say. The cup of blessing which we bless, is it not a sharing in the blood of Messiah? The bread that we break, is it not a sharing in the body of Messiah? Because there is one bread, we who are many are one body. We all partake of the one bread. What did Yeshua say? He said, this is my body broken for you. So when we break the bread, we're breaking his body. We are his body. So we are all part of that one bread. And what was he? He was the Word made flesh. Okay, and that's the bread that we partake of also. Look at Yisrael after the flesh. Are not those who eat the offering sharers in the altar? What then do I say? That an idol is of any value, or that which is offered to idols is of any value? No, but what the Gentiles offer, they offer to demons and not to Elohim. And I do not wish you to become sharers with demons. You are not able to drink the cup of the master and the cup of demons. You are not able to partake of the table of the master and of the table of demons. Do we provoke the master to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? And if you subscribe to these pagan ideologies, these pagan beliefs, whether or not that's what you call it in your mind, you are partaking with in the things that they partake of, those things which are, it says here, they offer to demons. I think we can get a grasp that pagan spirituality is of that sort. It's often you'll find that these kind of spiritual revelations came to people, which to my understanding is kind of demonic sources of information. So we shouldn't partake with their way of viewing the world, their way of going about things, their way of seeing what happens to them and saying, well, this is a sign of this, or I was just thinking about this and then this sign happened. I'm going to see that as a word that people love to throw around, but there isn't a biblical term. Confirmation. I'm going to see that as confirmation that I should do this thing or the other, but really what it is the divining of one's way from the natural world rather than of the spirit, of the word of Elohim, and looking for that. Often people, I think, feel almost fearful that if they are just trusting in what the scriptures have to say, that's not enough for them, that they need these external sources of direction almost in order to be able to find their way. Whereas one who comes to shalom in knowing that Elohim has given us all that we need for life and reference in the scriptures, looks to the scriptures, even though it may seem like you have less guidance. If you are trusting in the Creator, you have much more than people who kind of feel like they can voyeuristically look into the way that things are unfolding in what they might call the universe in some circles. 1 Timothy 4, 1-5 says, but the Spirit distinctly says that in latter times some shall fall away from the belief, paying attention to misleading spirits and teachings of demons, speaking lies in hypocrisy, having been branded on their own conscience, forbidding to marry, saying to abstain from foods which Elohim created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. Okay, so you might think of people like these people, maybe maybe people who are into veganism, people who subscribe to different guidance than the scriptures, and they might be convinced of these things because of things they read that they think is scientific or whatever else. These things are antithetical to the word of Elohim. The word of Elohim tells us to eat animals. It tells us to drink milk, that honey is good. And yet, if you subscribe to veganism, then you might think that those things are bad or abuse of animals or whatever else. People get their moral compass from the teachings of demons, ultimately. These things that are all about the natural world and returning back to nature, and ideas which almost have kind of a romanticism about them, but that ultimately are completely different to the word of Elohim. You can pretty much judge whether an idea is truly a biblical one by seeing whether or not people in the world subscribe to it, because those things which are in the word are foolishness to those who are in the world. They reject them. Okay, that's a way that we can see that Christmas is a bad thing. For example, well, the people of the world love Christmas. So look at these ideas and see whether or not people in the world are really into them too. You get kind of popular interpretations of prophecy, which are the same as well. These kind of end times scenarios that are not only believed by people who have the Spirit, supposedly, but also by people of the world who think of, whatever it might be, as signs of the end, and they're all looking for these prepper events that they're getting ready for, and they've got this kind of outline of the end of the world, which is not biblical. So if you subscribe to those interpretations of prophecy, maybe that should give you pause for thought. Well, wait, a lot of people in the world think in the same way, and they do not have the Spirit. They don't have the word of Elohim. Verse 4 says, because every creature of Elohim is good, and none is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving, for it is set apart by the word of Elohim and prayer. So those things which are set apart by the word of Elohim, in other words, the clean animals, none of them are to be rejected. Certainly not because of some idea that that is a moral way to live your life by not eating animals. Exodus 23 verse 2 says, do not follow a crowd to do evil, nor bear witness in a strife, so as to turn aside after many, to turn aside what is right. And these ideas do very much become popular ideas, and you'll find many of these things in the Torah movement, people who pay some kind of heed to the Torah, acknowledge it as truth. They mix in all of these things, and what they're doing is they're mixing the table of the master with the table of demons. They probably don't even realize that they're doing it. But you should be aware of these things, because being adverse to these things will be beneficial to you. And they may well be things that you like the sound of and that you want to believe are true. But if you believe the word, then you know that these things are actually not the truth. And the truth is what will set you free. Regardless of how much wisdom you think these things have, the word is really where you want to derive wisdom from. The word tells us to leave the ways of the Gentiles behind. They may offer you some form of comfort. You may think, oh, this is really good. I like being different from the rest of the world. I like the fact that I see things differently to them. But if that is only being different from the world and not being different from the world in the way that Yahovah would set his people apart, then that will not do you good, like following the word of Yahovah will. You may be deceived by deceiving spirits that these things are good, that you are deriving some sort of benefit from them. But be aware that this is how deception creeps in. If you are following things which are pagan spirituality, when you really break them down, then you may well be deceived in some way by the events in your life. Oh, I got tremendous healing from doing this practice. Well, maybe that healing was not of Yahovah. Maybe you presumed it was of Yahovah because it did good for you. But actually, the result of it was that you were led further down a path of being led astray from the word to some foreign destination, which anything which is different from the word is no good. And if you are deceived into following things which lead you away from the word, no matter whether or not you think they've had a good effect in your life, ultimately the effect that they've had is a terrible one. Isaiah 44:24-25 says, "Thus said Yahovah your Redeemer, and he who formed you from the womb, I am Yahovah, doing all, stretching out the heavens all alone, spreading out the earth with none beside me, frustrating the signs of the babblers, driving diviners mad, turning wise men backward, and making their knowledge foolish." There is a wisdom and a knowledge that comes from the world, that comes from deceiving spirits, that ultimately is demonic in nature. But Yahovah's word is distinct from that. In fact, it's antithetical to that. It does this, it confounds the babblers, those who think that divination is going to tell them something about the future. It drives such people mad because they have been sold a bill of lies about how that sort of stuff works and how it's truly spiritual in nature. The word of Elohim just demands very simple things of us. Do these things and it will be well with you, because Elohim, whom you trust in, watches over your life and guides you. That sort of thinking to people who want to, understand all about the spiritual underpinnings of reality, or understand about them, really be deceived about them. Those things are, they would think of them as nonsense. 1 Corinthians 1:18-28 says, "For the word of the cross is indeed foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of Elohim. For it has been written, I shall destroy the wisdom of the wise and set aside the learning of the learned ones. Where is the wise? Where is the scholar? Where is the debater of this age? Has not Elohim made foolish the wisdom of this world? For since in the wisdom of Elohim, the world through wisdom did not know Elohim, it pleased Elohim through the foolishness of preaching to save those who believe. And since Yahudim ask a sign and Greeks seek wisdom, yet we proclaim Messiah crucified, to the Jews a stumbling block and to Greeks foolishness. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Messiah the power of Elohim and the wisdom of Elohim. For the foolishness of Elohim is wiser than men, and the weakness of Elohim is stronger than men. For look at your calling, brothers, that there were not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble. But Elohim has chosen the foolish matters of the world to put to shame the wise, And Elohim has chosen the weak of the world to put to shame the strong. And Elohim has chosen the lowborn of the world and the despised and the ones that are not, that he might bring to naught the ones that are, so that no flesh should boast in his presence. The true wisdom, the true understanding is an understanding of Yahovah, who he is. That is the power of Elohim, and trusting in that will get for you all of the benefits that people might tell you that you get from other forms of spirituality. That is what you truly need to trust in. But I think because we're drawn to things which increase our understanding of the way things work, of course they don't really, but they profess to, then we feel like we are retaining some kind of control over our lives, and that we can, instead of trusting in Elohim to do something that we wish to be done, to provide for us, to make us healthy, because trusting in Elohim is a difficult thing. We would rather trust in ourselves to take control over certain facets of our life. But that again leads you away from Elohim to an understanding that may seem like wisdom, but it is ultimately leading you away from the one who can bestow upon you the things which you actually seek. 1 Corinthians 2 verse 14 says, "But the natural man does not receive the matters of the Spirit of Elohim, for they are foolishness to him, and he is unable to know them because they are spiritually discerned." You say to somebody who thinks they have all this wisdom and knowledge about bringing these things to themselves, maybe they believe in the law of attraction, you tell them to pray to Elohim, to believe in Elohim, that Messiah died and was raised from the dead, and that if they believe in Elohim, the same thing will be true of them, that he has the power to raise from the dead. And they just think, that's nonsense, that's foolishness. I do not believe such things. I would rather believe in something like, if I, whatever the practice may be, then I can achieve resurrection in the form of karma. And if I do good, then I will go on to be whatever life form they see as being a good one. Those sort of things, again, retain the control of the outcome within the person's sphere of influence. They can influence where they will end up. Whereas trusting in Elohim, to those who believe, has all the power in the world and makes all the sense in the world. But to those who do not believe, the Spirit of Elohim, the power of Elohim, is foolishness. Decide which one you are. Do you believe in Elohim, or are you kind of trying to manipulate the things in the world into the way that you think they should be organized? Isaiah 55, 8-9 says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares Yahovah. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." The way that things actually work are a million miles from any kind of knowledge or wisdom that you could gain about the spiritual world. Those things are for Elohim to deal with, not for us to deal with. Do not be deceived. Psalm 33, 8-12 says, "Let all the earth fear Yahovah, let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood fast. Yahovah brings the counsel of the nations to naught. He thwarts the plans of the peoples. The counsel of Yahovah stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose Elohim is Yahovah, the people whom he has chosen as his own inheritance." Don't be worried about people having whatever plans they may have, people getting together, the World Economic Forum with all of their plans. Yahovah is over all of it. If he wants to change the direction of something, he can. People got all het up about COVID-19, and what happened ultimately was we had the Omicron variant, which acted as a natural vaccine, so the people derived natural immunity, which was better or is better than the vaccine immunity, and it has made COVID pretty much just go away. It became attenuated, and when I think about those things, I think that's how Elohim works. He works in ways that we can't understand. Let's say that people did have all sorts of malicious intentions regarding COVID-19. Not something that I believe, but let's say they did. Then what happened? Something that they couldn't have ever expected, that completely took all of that power away from them to have lockdowns or whatever. We had a variant that was something that just came about organically, which took away all of that threat from the earth. And then even the most authoritarian of people have had to start ceding back that control which they took in that instance. Doesn't matter what the plans of the nations are, what the plans of whatever think tanks are, they're irrelevant. Yahovah will do as he wants to do. In Proverbs 3:5-8, it says, "Trust in Yahovah with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Know him in all your ways, and he makes all your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear Yahovah and turn away from evil. For it is healing to your navel and moistening to your bones." All of those other forms of knowledge about things that might be healing to you, we don't need any of them. We need Yahovah. We need to submit to Yahovah and for him to be in control in our lives, and for us to take what he has given us without trying to say, no, I'm going to take control of this through my own knowledge, my own wisdom, my own might, my own strength, and I'm going to change the course of how things are. Instead, trust in Yahovah with all of your heart. Don't lean on those understandings that come from the world. Isaiah 31:15 says, "Woe to the stubborn children, declares Yahovah, to make counsel, but not from me, and to devise plans, but not of my spirit." And as I say, they may think that it's of Yahovah because they say these things are of Yahovah because they're of the creation or whatever else, but actually they're not of his spirit, they're not of his word. "Who are setting out to go down to Egypt and have not asked my mouth, to be strengthened in the strength of Pharaoh, and to seek refuge in the cell," is the Hebrew word, "the shadow of Mitzrayim," the protection of Egypt. They look to the world for refuge rather than to Yahovah. "And the strength of Pharaoh shall become your shame, and the refuge in the shadow of Mitzrayim your confusion." Regrettably, that is how it has become with the knowledge of the world. "For his princes were at Zoan, and his messengers came to Chanes," or Chanes as it might be. "They were all ashamed of a people who do not profit them, not for help or profit, but a shame and also a reproach." The message concerning the beasts of the south, through a land of trouble and distress, from which came the lioness and the lion, the adder and the fiery flying serpent. They convey their riches on the backs of young donkeys, and their treasures on the humps of camels to an unprofitable people. "Even Egypt, whose help is vanity and empty. Therefore I have called her Rahav Haim Shaveth, and go write it before them on a tablet and inscribe it on a scroll that is for a latter day, a witness forever. And it's obviously always true that going to the world for your help is empty and vain and of no profit. And ultimately the best you can hope for is having been led astray from Yahovah to things which will not profit. That this is a rebellious people, lying children, children who refuse to hear the Torah of Yahovah. That's the teaching and instruction, not necessarily just the first 5 books of Moses. Who say to the seers, do not see, and to the prophets, do not prophesy to us what is right. Speak to us what is smooth, flattery, prophesy deceit. We want things that sound nice, that sound like they're going to be a prophet, that sound like they give us wisdom and understanding and knowledge, but ultimately are not telling us real refuge is only found in Yahovah. Turn aside from the way, swerve from the path, cause the set-apart one of Israel to cease from before us. Therefore, thus said the set-apart one of Israel, because you despise this word and trust in oppression and perverseness and rely on them, therefore this crookedness or this iniquity is to you like a breach ready to fall, a bulge in a high wall, whose breaking comes suddenly, swiftly. And he shall break it with like the breaking of the potter's vessel, which is broken in pieces without sparing, so that there is not found among its fragments a sherd to take fire from the hearth or to take water from the cistern. So those things that people think they are useful, that they're fashioned for themselves, Yahovah will come and he'll smash those things to pieces so that you can't even use a piece of it for something that would be useful, to take ashes from the fire, or to take fire rather from the hearth, or to take water from the cistern. Those things which seem so useful are now completely useless. Don't trust in such things, in other words. For thus said the Master Yahovah, the set-apart one of Israel, in returning and rest you are saved. In stillness and trust is your strength, but you would not. You don't want to hear the very simple message of be still, for I am Elohim. You do not want to trust in me. You would not do those things. You would not return to me and have true rest, have true shalom. You wanted to go about it and do your own things. Be warned, if alarm bells have started ringing when you've heard that, it's something that should alert you to the fact that maybe you're going the wrong way over whatever it is. And you might not be doing so knowingly, and that's a different thing to knowing that something is bad and doing it anyway, as we saw in Torah portion A. We'll come back in part 2. Okay, so in parts 2 and 3, what I'm going to do is go through these laws. As I said at the beginning, it's kind of like a second part to Torah portion, Mishpatim. The sort of topics that it addresses are similar. There's a lot of confusion like there are with certain of the laws in Mishpatim. In the first part, I really wanted to outline the idea that we are set apart, and that's why we look to these laws, and is even how we are set apart by these laws. And really to look at what it is to leave the world behind in its totality. But I want to go on to look at some of the laws specifically, and as I alluded to at the beginning, kind of see other situations in which the principle expounded in the law is is seen. So in Deuteronomy 21 verse 15 it says, when a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and they have borne him children, both the loved and the unloved, and the firstborn son of her who is unloved, then it has been on the day of causing his sons to inherit his possessions, he is not allowed to treat the son of the beloved wife as firstborn in the face of the son of the unloved, who is truly the firstborn. But he is to acknowledge the son of the unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he has. For he is the beginning of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. And this is something that we see Yaakov when he is giving inheritance on the day that he divides his inheritance. He gives a double portion to Joseph. And of course, Joseph was the son of the loved wife, Rachel. The actual firstborn was Reuven, but because Yaakov had issues with Reuven had acted badly towards him, he gives this double portion to Yosef. We know that the Torah was added because of transgressions, and that's an example of one of the transgressions, that someone who was faithfully walking with Yahovah was unaware what the right thing to do in that situation was. Yaakov was never told by Yahovah that we have recorded that what he was doing was wrong, but now we have the benefit of the Torah to know that this is not a good way to act. Verse 18 says, when a man has a wayward and rebellious son who is not listening to the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and who when they have disciplined him does not listen to them, then his father and his mother have taken hold of him and brought him out to the elders of his city, to the gate of his city, and have said to the elders of his city, this son of ours is wayward and rebellious. He is not listening to our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of the city shall stone him to death with stones. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst, and let Israel hear and fear. And this is an example of something that people misunderstand. And they think, you'll get people say to you, well, are you going to stone your children then if they're bad? And if the people really think that's what it's asking, then I can understand why someone would think that that was wrong, because that's not what Yahovah actually asks. The wayward and rebellious son is a glutton and a drunkard. So it's not talking about a child. Okay, maybe you could say that this was somebody into their adolescence, at least, if not a young adult, and they are being disobedient. And you'll notice it says when they have disciplined him. So it's after discipline when somebody is insensible to discipline. And we know that Yahovah is the same. If we are insensible to his discipline, then ultimately we will die. We will be partakers of the second death. Our souls will die. So he's got the same standard here. All the men of the city are to stone him with stones. So his parents are to bring him before the elders of the city, those who would sit in the gate, the judges, perhaps, and then he would be stoned because he was wayward and rebellious. And this is another example of something which we are a million miles away from in modern society. We have children, adolescents, teenagers who grow up to be disobedient because they have no discipline in their lives, and ultimately they're not facing the repercussions of this. we find that Yahovah's law, as we saw in Deuteronomy 13, is so that people hear and fear. So the law itself is a measure which stops people from going too far. If you clearly outline for somebody what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and what the repercussions are of unacceptable behavior, that has a good effect on bringing somebody into discipline. The same with parents with their children. Parents who say, if you do that, I'm going to do this, and then they don't follow up on doing it. They tend to raise undisciplined children, and children who have learned, and they have taught the children that they really will not do what they say. If you outline what the consequence for bad behavior is, and outline what that bad behavior actually is that is unacceptable, then children can grow within those boundaries and know that this is a good way to be, this is a bad way to be, and if I operate in a bad way, then I will be disciplined. We should teach that as humans to our children, and that is certainly how Yahovah is with us. Things have consequences. Acting in a way which is bad have actual real consequences in the Torah, not so that Yahovah can cause the death of loads of people, but so that those people will never be acting in that way in the first place. We also have many instructions in Scripture that those who believe the word, who are the only ones who are going to be affected by it anyway, actually know, well, if I go beyond this standard of behavior, then I will not make it into the kingdom. I will not be given eternal life. We know what the consequences of misbehavior are. So far from this being some kind of barbaric law, if you think about it carefully, then you'll see that it's actually good for Yahovah to be like this. It's good for him to give us boundaries and consequences. If we had the same boundaries and consequences in the society that we live in at the moment, you wouldn't have children running wild. I heard the other day, I think, that in Wales, they have banned smacking of children. So it's as much of an offence to smack a child as it would be to if you smacked an adult. That would be battery. So you will be able to be charged with the same if you smack your children. The removal of this ability to punish one's children is what causes disobedient and rebellious children. Verse 22 says, "And when a man has committed a sin worthy of death, then he has been put to death, and you have hung him on a tree. Let his body not remain overnight on the tree, for you do certainly bury him the same day. For he who was hanged is accursed of Elohim, so that you do not defile the land which Yahovah your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance." And this is what it's referring to when it says that Yeshua became a curse for us, because it's written, "Cursed is he who was hung on a tree." And Yeshua was hung on a tree, okay, a cedar tree. I'm not going to get into the idea of was it a cross or was it a stake. I can tell you that it was a cross. The idea that the word of that means stake was used is not taking into account the evolution of language, that the word came to mean stake eventually, but didn't in the day when it was written. But there's a whole lot that I could go into there. But Yeshua was hung on a tree for us. He became a curse for us. And he was buried the same day, as it turned out. Joseph of Arimathea, he came and took his body and put it in a tomb which had not been used. The Romans had come and had broken his legs so that he died, so that he wasn't hung on the tree on the Sabbath day. And then Joseph of Arimathea came along. I don't know whether this is what he was thinking of. It says that he was a good and righteous man, so maybe he was thinking that he shouldn't have remained on the tree until the next day. But that was certainly something that happened to Yeshua. Verse 1 of Deuteronomy 22 says, "You do not see your brother's ox or his sheep going straying away, and have hidden yourself from them. You do certainly return them to your brother without fail. And if your brother is not near you, or if you have not known him, then you have brought it to your own house, and it has been with you until your brother seeks it. Then you've returned it to him. And so you do with this donkey, and so you do with this garment, and so you do with whatever your brother loses, which he has lost, and you have found. You are not allowed to hide yourself." So it says here, you do not see your brother's ox or sheep when he has lost them, basically. And as I alluded to at the beginning, these laws can be applied beyond the specific animals which are mentioned. If your brother loses something, then if he is not near you, then you bring it to your house, and it has been with you until your brother seeks it. Until your brother seeks it. It doesn't say, come up with your own way of doing this, ask around and see if anyone knows who it is, and then get rid of it if you can't immediately ascertain whose it is. We're told to retain these things until your brother seeks it, so you can return it to him. And you might think, well, that's just a hassle. This is just something that gets in the way. But again, don't lean on your own understanding. Trust in what Yahovah says. Verse 4 says, "You do not see your brother's donkey or his ox fall down on the way and have hidden yourself from them. You do certainly raise them up with him." So today, that might look like if you see somebody struggling with something, you see somebody broken down, don't turn your face from them, don't hide yourself from them, but rather go to them and help them with whatever it is. You can either see these laws as things which only pertain to the very narrow interpretation which you can give to them. Well, if it's not a donkey or it's not an ox, let's say it's a goat, and it falls down, then you don't go and help to raise them up. Or you can look at that and you can say, well, this actually applies more broadly than this. This is a principle of what Yahovah says is just. In verse 5 it says, "A woman does not wear that which pertains to a man, nor does a man put on a woman's garment. For whoever does this is an abomination to Yahovah your Elohim." And I've previously gone through the language which is used here, but this is more to do with a woman appearing as a man appearing as a woman. And I've gone through before, again, how a man having long hair is a man appearing as a woman. Having long hair is described in Scripture as having women's hair. Again, Paul says it is a shame for a man to have long hair. Something that people who have long hair might not want to hear, but again, don't fall into the trap of saying, well, I'm going to try and find a reason why I don't have to do that. Same with any law that asks of you something that you may not immediately want to do. Instead say, pretty plain, it says that it's a shame for a man to have long hair. I'm not going to have long hair, whether you can understand where it comes from in the Torah or not. Verse 6 says, when you come upon a bird's nest along the way, in any tree or on the ground with young ones or eggs, with the mother sitting on the young or on the eggs, do not take the mother with the young. Let the mother go without fail. Take the young for yourself, so that it might be well with you, and that you have prolonged your days. And we could speculate as to the reason that this is, but I would be careful as to speculating the reason for something as opposed to looking at the principle and applying it to other things. The rabbis in Judaism are prone to do things like this. They'll see this and they'll say, oh, you can't do it because, if you take the mother, then the mother can't reproduce. And this shows that this is an element of Elohim's nature. And if we recognize this element of his nature, then we can expand it to other things. That's where things become kind of like what Charlie was talking about with the midrash, where things get expanded out without good reason, based on the speculation of men. Difference between having a principle which is clearly seen and speculating as to what that principle might be. Verse 8 says, when you build a new house, then you have made a parapet for your roof, and you do not bring blood guilt on your house when one falls from it. So it's not so common today for people to build houses for themselves, but some people do it. So if you are to ever build a house, build a parapet for your roof. Why? It says so that you don't bring blood guilt on your house. The reason is explained for us. How would you bring blood guilt on your house? Because if you have not followed the Torah and someone was to fall off the roof and die, we're told this would bring blood guilt upon the house. So this is something that we can extract the principle from and apply to other things. That if you are to build something, that you would pay attention to the safety of others, that it's good to do those things. It's good to have preventative measures against death. But take it back to its basics. You can understand this as, if you ever build a house, build a parapet on your roof. Don't say, that's not how we do things today. You wouldn't do the same with any other instructions in the Torah. So don't say, well, I don't need a parapet on my roof for this reason or that reason. Just take the instruction for what it says. If you build a new house, put a parapet on your roof. Don't lean on your own understanding. Trust in Yahovah. In verse 9 it says, do not sow your vineyard with different kinds of seed, lest the yield of your seed which you have sown and the fruit of your vineyard be defiled. So, talking about vineyards, we see the same with the planting of fields. Don't put diverse types of seed together. Again, we don't need to speculate as to the reason why that might be, perhaps putting pseudo-scientific explanations on things. One thing that we can see in the word is that the word of Elohim is described as seed in the parable of the sower. So if the word of Elohim is seed, then we shouldn't take other forms of seed which people might take and bear the fruit of those things. For example, the extra biblical texts, we should never be mixing them in with the scriptures, because you have something which is truth, which is given by Elohim for instruction by his Spirit, and then you've got something that was written by men. Even if you think, well, maybe it is the word of Elohim, you've got something that you know is the word of Elohim. Don't mix it with something about which there is debate. And there are videos on the channel for people who are interested in those books. There's one called The Mysterious Book of Enoch, and there's another one called The Extra Biblical Texts, a Thorough Examination. Look those up if you have interest in Jubilee or Jasher, or you think that the Dead Sea Scrolls are a trove of information. Any of those things, which can be just things that you kind of take for granted because other people say, because those things have become popular. Again, don't follow after a multitude to do evil. Don't be swayed by the fact that many other people are doing a certain thing. Those videos will give you food for thought about those books, things that perhaps you never knew about them. But certainly don't mix the word of Elohim with other seed, other spiritual teachings, whatever the case may be, things that were written by men as opposed to things which were inspired by the Spirit of Elohim. Verse 10 says, "Do not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Do not put a garment of different kinds of wool and linen together." Okay, so often this will be translated just don't wear a garment of mixed material. It's not what it says. The Hebrew says don't mix wool and linen together. That's the context. Not any different materials, wool and linen. But this is another thing that people misunderstand, and maybe they'll throw back at you if you say, I keep the Torah. That maybe they'll say, are you going to get rid of all your clothes which are polyester and nylon because you can't have things mixed together? Now, if the word of Elohim said to not do that, of course we wouldn't do that. It doesn't matter that the ways of the world are different. That would simply be something that sets us apart. But it is a useful thing to know so that people who actually misunderstand the Torah can be instructed in what it actually says. Okay, do not plow with an ox and a donkey together. This is something which is could be phrased as do not unevenly yoke animals. Okay, an ox is a lot more powerful than a donkey. This is something that we can see to be true. If you ever did have an ox and a donkey yoked together, then you would appreciate that. It's like what I was talking about in Torah portion Re'eh at the beginning. When you trust and obey Yahovah's law, then you can see and understand why it is the case. It may not make sense to you immediately why you wouldn't yoke an ox and a donkey together. But if you ever actually saw that happening, then you would understand. And you would understand that just trusting and obeying what has been told to you would have been the right thing to do. That then you can see that that is something that bears fruit afterwards. Basic point being, understanding of why Yahovah has done something is not necessary for obedience. Trusting and obeying the word will yield good whether or not you understand why it does. In 2 Corinthians 6:14-16, it says, "Do not become unevenly yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership have righteousness and lawlessness? And what fellowship has light with darkness? An ox, of course, is a clean beast. A donkey is an unclean beast. And what agreement has Messiah with worthlessness? What part does a believer have with an unbeliever? And what union has the dwelling place of Elohim with idols? For you are a dwelling place of the living Elohim, as Elohim has said, I shall dwell in them and walk among them. I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. Another principle, which we can see in the idea of don't go after the way that the Gentiles do things, the way that those who are as yet unclean go after things. Don't try to do things according to their ways. You cannot eat at the table of Messiah and the table of demons. The same truths are present throughout all of these scriptures. 1 Corinthians 7 verse 10 says, and to the married I command, not I but the master, a wife should not separate from a husband. But if she is indeed separated, let her remain unmarried or be restored to favor with her husband. And let not a husband send a wife away. And to the rest I say, not the master, if any brother has an unbelieving wife, and she thinks well to live with him, let him not send her away. And a woman who has an unbelieving husband, and he thinks well to live with her, let her not send him away. For the unbelieving husband has been set apart in the wife, and the unbelieving wife has been set apart in the husband. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but now they are set apart. So don't think of being yoked with one who is unclean in this way to divorce a husband or a wife on the basis that they are unclean and you have been cleansed, because they are set apart so that your children are clean. Not saying that they'll be saved by you. It's talking about clean and unclean, holy and profane. How your children are made clean by you being clean, even though your husband is unclean. And if the unbelieving one separates, let him separate himself. A brother or sister has not been enslaved in such matters, but Elohim has called us to peace. So to use the figurative that we have here, if the donkey wants to not be yoked with the ox, then let them leave. You are not enslaved, as it says. In such matters, we are, of course, slaves to righteousness. If the word of Elohim told us to do something, then we would be enslaved to do that, not in the way that we think of slavery, but in the way that we are our masters. Verse 12 says, make tassels on the four corners of the garment with which you clothe yourself. So 3 words there. Gedil, kanafot, okay, or kanaf, is a corner, and kasa. We looked at the word kasa when we looked at the idea of being clothed, being labashed, of course. The word gedil is twisted threads, tassels, festoons, whatever festoons would be, but this is what is asked when it says here, make tassels on the 4 corners. It's not the word make zitziot on the corners. This is an explanation of what zitziot actually are, and that they are kind of like tassels, that they are twisted. Okay, that's why I imagine tzitzit are made in such a way. The word kanaf, we had the plural used, kanafot, wing, extremity, edge. So we will see where else this word is used, and usually you will see the word wing there, but really it's talking about one's corners of the garments, the extremities of the garments. If you want to call them the wings of your garment, that's fine, but understand exactly what is being referred to. It's a word that is used in Malachi 4 verse 2. It says, but to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his kanafot. So the Son of Righteousness, the word there being the word for the sun as opposed to the moon, a figurative term that's used there is, of course, Yeshua. We saw with Yeshua, he did arise with healing in his kanafot. Remember what is on the kanafot, what is on the corners or the extremities of the garments. It's tzitzit. Of course, Yeshua would have worn tzitzit because he was without sin. We see someone coming to his kanafot, to his wings for healing. So Yeshua, spoken figuratively as the Son of Righteousness, did rise with healing in his kanafot. See, a woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years came from behind and touched, the Greek word is kraspedon, of his garment. For she said to herself, if I only touch his garment, I shall be healed. The speculation being that she was believing Malachi 4 verse 2. Kraspedon, okay, we see here, it says the extremity or prominent part of a thing, the edge, the skirt, or margin. We see a tassel. The Jews had such appendages. Obviously, this is written by someone who thinks that the law was for the Jews and that it was done away with. But we see that kraspedon means both kanaf and gedil. It means a tassel and the extremity. So this woman came and touched Yeshua's tzitzit. I think this would probably be a good translation to be in the Bible, our English Bible, so that people could see what was actually being said here. I think that maybe those who follow the man-made religion of Christianity would be able to more readily identify that these things are righteousness and that they should be done if they could see that Yeshua did them. Maybe they'd just say, oh, it was all done away with after he died. But it would be more relatable to them if they actually knew what this passage said. This is the word kasa that we looked at. It's to clothe oneself in the sense of covering oneself. You can speak of it as being concealing. But again, it's covering, and it is used in the sense of clothing. So if we go back to that verse, we can see, okay, the garment with which you clothe yourself, with which you cover yourself, with which you conceal yourself. So people wonder sometimes how many tzitzit are they to wear. Well, we see the garment with which you kasa yourself, whatever that might be. I would say that is alluding to an outer garment that you cover yourself with, whether you've got clothes underneath or not. It says to put the tassels on the four corners, so there should be at least 4 of them. You could also make it a fringe around the edge, a fringe of tassels if you wanted. That would also be the 4 corners of the garment, just like the 4 corners of the world are spoken of to mean all of the world. Maybe it's talking about all of the extremity or the kanaf of your garment. But kanafot denotes to me individual kanafs, individual corners, and it speaks of 4 of them. So I wear my tzitzit equidistant around the garments to which they are attached. If you're a woman, then you can sew tzitzit onto whatever garment you want. Make the tassels separate, and then you can sew them onto different garments, and they can be, if you want, cut off and put on other garments. If you want, you can sew hooks, those little clips with the clasp which will open them, so that you can hook the tzitzit onto them, so you can take them on and off of the garments. It's important, though, that you recognize that this command is not only for men, it is a command which is given to all Israel. People get confused by the word b'nai, children of Israel, or sons of Israel, when they see that the sons of Israel are to do something, specifically tzitzit. They think, well, I'm not a male, so I won't do it. Jewish tradition also says that women don't wear tzitzit. The word b'nai, though, is both the word for a group of men and the word for a group of mixed individuals. If the argument that the b'nai Yisrael were to do certain commands only applied to men, then that would be true of all the Torah, not only tzitzit. So if you're a woman and you previously believed, I don't need to wear tzitzit, that's not required of me, that's not true, this command applies to you like any other command in Scripture. So make yourself some tzitzit, adorn yourself with the tzitzit. As we saw before, there's something which sets you apart from the world. Don't worry about how you're going to look, because you're supposed to look different from the world. And if you believe the word, if you cherish the word, then this is something that Elohim has given to you, so that you are his treasured possession, so that you are marked out as one of his chosen. We'll come back in part 3. Okay, so in this part, we're just going to continue on reading the teaching and instruction of Yahovah, the various laws that he gives us. It's good to consider the Torah, to meditate upon the Torah. There is much to learn about Yahovah and about what right and wrong actually looks like. So in verse 13 of Deuteronomy 22, it says, when any man takes a wife and has gone into her and has hated her, and has made abusive charges against her, and brought an evil name on her, and said, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I did not find her a virgin. Then the father and the mother of the young woman have taken and brought out proof of the girl's virginity to the elders of the city at the city gate. So this is a good example of one of those laws I was talking about, where people read it and they kind of read it through the lens of a fallen mind. And they also read it as, I don't know, they're kind of preconceptions about how things were in the past, the whole lie of the patriarchy and all of those sorts of things, those ideas that are so proximal to us that we apprehend them to be a part of things that we read. Oh, it's an ancient culture. It must have been like this. So people think that this is a law that is saying, if a man doesn't like a woman, then he can demand proof of her virginity. But this is not what the law is saying at all. It is, in fact, a protection of the woman. The whole thing is framed as, when a man has brought abusive charges against a woman, then her father and her mother bring out proof of her virginity. Not that they have to. It's certainly not, as some people understand this, that if they don't do that, the girl is stoned to death. If we approach Yahovah's law as having things like that in it, because of preconceptions that we have, then we will always come to misunderstandings. And it is such misunderstandings that give his law and him a bad name. Verse 16 says, and the girl's father has said to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man as wife, and he hates her. And see, he has made abusive charges against her, saying, I did not find your daughter a virgin, and yet these are the proofs of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread the garment before the elders of the city. So, again, it's not that they have to do this. It's just if somebody is making abusive charges, then they are held responsible for having done that when actually it wasn't true. And the elders of that city have taken that man and punished him. So notice who they are punishing. They're punishing the man. All of this is about the man. He brings abusive charges against her. Then the father and mother of that young woman have taken and brought out proof of the girl's virginity to the elders. So this is something which is afforded to the father and the mother as a way that they can prove their daughter's virginity, and then the man is punished. The whole thing is about the man. It's not about the girl, unless it is true what he is saying about her, and then she is punished. If she has, if she's made out that she's a virgin and then she's not a virgin, and that can be proved, then she is punished. But this actual law here, the one on the screen, is about the man and the man being punished. And find him 100 pieces of silver and given them to the father of the young woman, because he has brought an evil name on a virgin of Israel, which should teach you about what it is for someone to have a name, a new name, a good name, Yahovah doing things in his name, calling on Yahovah's name. All of it is not to do with the actual thing that a person is called, just as this evil name isn't, some evil-sounding thing which the girl is called. That would be ridiculous. We understand that, and yet we misunderstand often Yahovah's name. And she is to be his wife, and he is not allowed to put her away all his days. So people will say, well, she then has to be his wife. But this, again, is a misunderstanding. If somebody is just seeking to marry a woman, to sleep with her, and then to divorce her, then this law prevents that from happening. The girl's mother and father can present proof of her virginity, and then the man can't go about doing this. Obviously, this is something which has been a problem before the Torah has been given, that men would act in such a way. Verse 20 says, but if the matter is true that the girl was not found a virgin, then they shall bring out the girl to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city have stoned her to death with stones, because she has done wickedness in Israel to fornicate in her father's house. Thus you have purged the evil from your midst. And this would be true of anyone who was a fornicator. It's not saying that the parents have to bring out proof of her virginity, otherwise she is stoned. It's saying if the matter is not true. We go to other places in the Torah to find out how that matter would be established. It would have to be established with 2 or 3 witnesses. If someone is to be put to death, there has to be 2 or 3 witnesses. It's not done just in this case if the father and the mother don't provide proof of her virginity. It has to be proven according to Torah, 2 or 3 witnesses, which I imagine would be fairly difficult. It's certainly not something which would be the case if the man was lying. Witnesses could not then be brought against the girl. So it all depends with laws like this, how you go into it. What are your preconceptions? Are you reading it without a filter to try and see what it says? Or are you reading in your own preconceptions about the world, the ancient world, the way things were, the patriarchy, things like that? Ideas that are superimposed over Torah, that if you make those assumptions, then you could say this law is unjust. But all it really is an ignorance of what the Torah actually says and the mechanisms by which the Torah would work, how the judges were to adjudicate in such cases. Deuteronomy 19:15-19 says, when one witness does not rise up against the man concerning any iniquity or any sin that he commits, at the mouth of 2 witnesses or at the mouth of 3 witnesses, a matter is established. When a malicious witness rises up against any man to accuse him of turning aside, then both men who have the dispute shall stand before Yahovah, before the priests and the judges who serve in those days, and the judges shall diligently search and see if the witness is a false witness who has falsely accused his brother. Then you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. So in this case, how would that work? Well, if the man has accused the woman falsely and that's proved, then we see how he is punished. If there is not more than one witness does not rise up against the man concerning any iniquity or sin that he commits. Okay, so there has to be 2 or 3 witnesses. If a false witness was to rise up against this girl, then that false witness would be under the penalty of the same thing that would be done to the girl being done to them. So if they were to lie, then they would know that if it was discovered, they would be under the death penalty. So there's a huge deterrent against that. The judges will diligently search and see if the witness is a false witness. This is something which is serious at this point. Maybe you could think of it in terms of if you are accused of falsely witnessing against someone, there would be a police investigation into whether or not you did it. And, you know, it's just not worth coming under police investigation for the sake of a false claim, especially when you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. In other words, if the malicious witness is found to be lying, then the girl would have, if the malicious witness was found to be true, the girl would be put to death. If the malicious witness is found to be lying, then the same thing that would have been done to the girl, the death penalty, would be done to them. So the idea that this is all about a man bringing charges against a woman and then the girl's father and mother having to prove her virginity, otherwise she's killed, is just not what the Bible actually says. It's another case of people taking a verse out of context, applying over it their own understanding of the world, their own preconceptions, and coming to false conclusions. Deuteronomy 17:6-7. At the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses is he to die that is to be put to death. He is not put to death by the mouth of one witness. The hand of the witnesses are first against him to put him to death, and the hand of all the people last. So you have purged the evil from your midst. So all of these laws which call for the death penalty are all about getting out of the midst of Israel those who do such things. So it's only at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. Now this actually brings up an interesting consideration for us. if people misapprehend the law to be saying something that it's not, and they're against that thing, then Yahovah is with them. If people misunderstand this and say, what, so the girl's father or mother needs to prove her virginity, otherwise she's killed. That's no good. Yahovah would agree with that. He wouldn't be against those people. But if people actually accurately understand the law, and then they say, that is not correct, that's not right, then they are speaking against Elohim. But people who misunderstand the law to be saying things that it's not, they are not necessarily to blame. When a man is found lying with a woman married to a husband, then both of them have died, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman. Thus you have purged the evil from Yisrael. Interesting just how much the cultural, the worldly attitude to adultery is different to Yahovah's. To Yahovah, it is a sin so grave, as with fornication, that it requires that those people would be put to death. He doesn't want those people to be amongst Israel. Again, you purge the evil from your midst. Verse 23 says, when a girl who is a virgin is engaged to a husband, and a man finds her in the city and lies with her, then you have brought them both out to the gate of the city and have stoned them to death with stones. The girl, because she did not cry out in the city, and the man, because he has humbled his neighbor's wife. Thus you have purged the evil from your midst. But if a man finds the girl who is engaged in the field, and the man seizes her and lies with her, then only the man who lay with her has died. But you have done no matter to the girl. The girl has no sin worthy of death. For the matter is like a man who rises against his neighbor and has killed him. For he found her in the field, and she has cried out, the engaged girl, but without anyone to save her. So we see here that if somebody lies with somebody who is engaged and they're in the city, then both of them are held culpable, because the girl could have cried out if there were people who were around. If, however, they were in the field, then only the man has committed a sin worthy of death. Now, it might be that they were found together in the field and the girl was consensual all the way through. But Yahovah says, if there is room for doubt in this instance, then only the man is put to death. And perhaps we can appreciate from that we are to give people the benefit of the doubt when something cannot be proved. Even if you think, oh, you were found together in the field, but actually I know about you two and the fact that you've been into each other for a while, and you suspect somebody for other reasons, but you can't prove something, then maybe give them the benefit of the doubt. Here, certainly the girl is given the benefit of the doubt. If she's found in a situation where she couldn't have cried out and the man might well have been forcing himself upon her. Verse 28 says, when a man finds a girl who is a virgin, who is not engaged, and he takes hold of her and lies with her, and they are found out, then the man who lay with her is to give to the girl's father 50 pieces of silver, and she is to be his wife because he has humbled her. He is not allowed to put her away all his days. Now this is actually a retelling, the Deuteros Nomos, the second law, of something given in the book of Exodus, which we'll look at. This is a different perspective on the same law, as I've mentioned before. Just like the gospel account will talk about the same event, but will give us different information about it. So if somebody, it says that when a man finds a girl who is a virgin and not engaged, and he takes hold of her and lies with her, people think this is talking about rape. But it's not talking about rape. What it's talking about is a law that has already been given. Exodus 22:16-17 says, and when a man entices a virgin who is not engaged and lies with her, he does certainly pay the bride price for her to be his wife. What did it say? The man who lay with her has given to the girl's father 50 pieces of silver. That's the bride price. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he pays according to the bride price of virgins. So even if they don't end up getting married, he still has to pay the bride price. That is exactly what we're seeing here in Deuteronomy 22. The idea of a man taking hold of a woman and lying with her, to the fallen mind, if you read it through the lens of the fallen mind, maybe you could read into that rape, but that's not actually there in the text. Here we see it expressed in Exodus 22 as a man enticing a woman and lying with her. In verse 30 it says, a man does not take his father's wife, nor uncover his father's skirt. Okay, something which is told to us in the book of Leviticus also. In chapter 23, we're going to see people who can be in the leadership in the body. Okay, we're going to hear of the phrase, the assembly of Yahovah, and people make the false assumption that this is talking about the congregation. It's just talking about being a member of Yisrael. But the assembly of Yahovah was something that is different. We know that because we see people being refused entry to the assembly of Yahovah who otherwise are explicitly in Scripture given entry into just the general congregation. It says, no one of illegitimate birth does enter the assembly of Yahovah. Even a 10th generation of his does not enter the assembly of Yahovah. Okay, so it says here, no one who has had their genitalia removed enters into the leadership. Okay, we know that the leaders that Yahovah chooses, what we see in the word is that they are men. So even when somebody is emasculated, when they have their genitalia removed, they are not suitable then. So somebody who was a eunuch, for example, who has no testicles, is not suitable to be a leader in the body. No one of illegitimate birth. Now we know that you can be in the body, in the congregation, if you are of illegitimate birth. We had somebody who was, they said that they were a bastard so that they could not be part of our assembly. Now, the way that I understood this person is that they just didn't like the idea of having to follow the Torah. And we'd done a pretty good job of showing them that you do have to follow the Torah. So as what seemed to me like a last-ditch attempt, they said, oh, well, I can't be part of your church anyway if you follow the Torah. But as I said, this is not talking about the congregation. This is talking about leadership. So these things should also be considered when we are thinking of appointing leaders. Verse 3 says, an Ammonite or a Moabite does not enter the assembly of Yahovah. Even a 10th generation of them does not ever enter the assembly of Yahovah, because they did not meet you with bread and water on the way when you came out of Mitzrayim, and because they hired against you Balaam son of Beor, from Pethor of Aram Naharaim to curse you. But Yahovah your Elohim has refused to listen to Balaam, and Yahovah your Elohim does turn for you the curse into a blessing for you, because Yahovah your Elohim loves you. Do not seek their peace, nor their good, all your days forever. So we can take from this that we are to give everyone a chance. Everyone can be part of the congregation. But if somebody has done something in the past that would make them unsuitable for leadership, that we should maybe bear that in mind. Okay, so everyone can be part of the congregation of Yahovah, Yisrael, but not everyone is suitable to be a leader. In Isaiah 56, 4-7, it says, "For thus said Yahovah to the eunuchs," people who we've just read can't be part of the assembly of Yahovah, "who cherish my Sabbaths and have chosen what pleases me, and hold fast to my covenant. To them I have given in my house and within my walls a place and a name better than that of sons and daughters. I give them an everlasting name that is not cut off. Also the sons of the foreigner who join themselves to Yahovah, maybe the Ammonites or the Moabites, to serve him and to love the name of Yahovah, to be his servants, all who cherish the Sabbath and not profane it and hold fast to my covenant, them I have brought to my set-apart mountain, and let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices are accepted on my altar, for my house is called the house of prayer for all the peoples." So again, these people are explicitly forbidden from being a part of the leadership. But Yahovah says, if they follow my covenant, if they are faithful to me, then they can have a name in my house better than that of sons and daughters. Verse 7 says, "Do not loathe an Edomite, for he is your brother. Do not loathe an Egyptian, because you were strangers in his land. The children of the third generation born to them do enter the assembly of Yahovah." So after a certain period of time, the third generation born to them. And what's it talking about? It's obviously not talking about any random person, because they will be the third generation from a random Egyptian or a random Edomite. It's talking about when they are part of Israel. Okay, 3 generations hence from them joining Israel, then they can be a part of the assembly of Yahovah. If the assembly of Yahovah was Israel, then any Edomite or any Egyptian whose history could be traced back 3 generations which would be everyone on the earth. Everyone is more than 3 generations of succession in a family line. Then any of them would be able to join the assembly. This criteria shows us that they are able to join Israel, but only after 3 generations can they be a part of the leadership. When the army goes out against your enemies, then you have guarded yourself. When there is any man among you who is not clean because of an emission in the night, then he is gone outside the camp. Let him not come into the midst of the camp. And it has been at the turning of evening that he bathes with water, and at the going in of the sun, let him come into the midst of the camp. And you have had a place outside the camp where you have gone out, and you have a sharp implement among your equipment. And it has been when you sit down outside that you have dug with it and turned and covered your excrement. So this might seem to be a weird command, but it's talking about when the army goes out against your enemies, having cleanness in the camp, which then we can understand as we read on. "For Yahovah your Elohim walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and give your enemies over to you. Therefore your camp shall be set apart, so that he does not see an unclean matter among you, and shall turn away from you. So normally in Israel, they would have the tabernacle or the temple in their midst. We're told in Leviticus 15, verse 31, that people in Israel had to be clean because Yahovah was in the temple in their midst, lest they defile the temple, which is where Yahovah was physically. Which is why when the army goes out and they're somewhere far away from the temple, that they still have to observe cleanness, because Yahovah walks in their midst. He is physically present, just like he was in the temple, which again is why we need to concern ourselves with cleanness only when Yahovah is in our midst. He's in our midst spiritually, in our hearts, which is why we have to be clean spiritually. But the cleanliness of the flesh is only something which is called for when Yahovah is in your midst physically, either in the temple or if the army has gone out to fight against the enemies and he's in the midst of the camp. Verse 15 says, you do not hand over to his master the slave who has escaped from his master to you. Let him dwell with you in your midst, in the place which he chooses, within one of your gates where it is pleasing to him. Do not oppress him. Okay, so we see here the principle that if somebody has escaped from their master, and we see elsewhere the idea that if they love their master, then they will have their ear pierced through with an awl to the door of their master's house. But if they want to escape from their master, i.e. they don't love being in their master's house, you're not to return them there. And this is a principle of Torah which is appropriate in the situation where somebody is being abused. It might be an abused wife. Usually, adultery would be the only reason for divorce. But if an abused wife escapes from her husband's house, you shouldn't return her to the house. We can also see this as talking about us, or talking about people who want to come to Yahovah, people who repent and are baptized, for example. If they decide, I don't want to be Yahovah's slave anymore, I don't want to be a slave to righteousness, I'm going to be a slave to sin, then we should not try to return them to the house of the master by force. We can certainly talk to them and show them the right way, but we should not hand them over to the master, so to speak. We should not prevent them from leaving if that is what they are set on doing. We can tell them the right way, but that should be the end of it, because each person has their own choice who they are to make master, and when they've had enough of that. Verse 17 says, none of the daughters of Israel is to be a cult prostitute, nor any of the sons of Israel be a cult prostitute or a whore. I don't know why in this translation they have put cult prostitute. I'm not sure whether that is something that is sound, or whether they've just thought to interpret certain practices in history into the text of Scripture. Do not bring the gift of a whore or the pay of a dog into the house of Yahovah, your Elohim, for any vowed offering, for both of these are an abomination to Yahovah, your Elohim. So if you have earned money dishonestly, then that is not something that you should offer in sacrifice to Elohim. Don't think to yourself, I've lived a life of crime, I'm going to give the proceeds of it to Elohim because he needs money. As we've looked at recently, Elohim is not looking for the particular material things from us. He's looking for our obedience. And he tells us, do not bring that which is the results of prostitution into the house of Yahovah to try and honor Yahovah with something abominable. Verse 19 says, do not lend the interest to your brother, interest of silver, interest of food, or interest of whatever is lent interest. To a foreigner you lend the interest, but to your brother you do not lend the interest, so that Yahovah your Elohim might bless you in all that you put your hand to in the land which you are entering to possess. So another law here where you cannot do it to one who is set apart, but you are permitted to do it to a foreigner. But if it's bad to do it to someone who is your brother, why would you then choose to do it to somebody just because you weren't going to get in trouble, for want of a better phrase, with Yahovah for doing it? Again, the word of Elohim tests our hearts, but we are not permitted, if you lend to your brother, you are not permitted to ask usury for the loan. When one lends to somebody who is a part of Israel, what is paid back is that amount. And we see elsewhere in the Torah that it is good to forgive those debts and that you are required to forgive those debts after 7 years at the most. Every 7 years there was a forgiveness of debt. And we are told elsewhere in Scripture that we are not to have evil in our hearts when we lend to someone. If the year of forgiveness of debts is coming up soon, we are to lend freely to them, knowing that Yahovah will bless us for doing such. Verse 21 says, when you make a vow to Yahovah your Elohim, do not delay to pay it, for Yahovah your Elohim is certainly requiring it of you, and it shall be sin in you. But when you abstain from vowing, it is not sin in you. That which has gone out from your lips you shall guard and do, for you voluntarily vowed to Yahovah your Elohim what you have promised with your mouth. So if you vow something to Yahovah, even if later you regret it and you think, I should never have done that, you guard to do it because you voluntarily vowed it to Yahovah. Therefore, you should pay what you were vowed to do. It doesn't matter if later you regret the vow you have made. All that matters is that in that moment, you intended to make a vow to Yahovah. If you do that, it is required of you to pay it. If you don't do it, then it is sin in you. Verse 24 says, when you come into your neighbor's vineyard, you shall eat to the satisfaction of your desire, but do not put any in a receptacle of yours. When you come into your neighbor's standing grain, you shall pluck the heads with your hand, but do not use a sickle on your neighbor's standing grain. So if your neighbor has crops growing, you can go and eat of them as they are growing. You are just not allowed to harvest any of it. You can't go in and collect a load of it for some future time. But if you're passing through the field, then you are allowed to snack on what is grown. When a man takes a wife and shall marry her, then it has been, if he finds no favor, if she finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found a matter of uncoveredness in her, and Yeshua later reveals that this is adultery, and he has written a certificate of divorce and put it in her hand and sent her out of his house. And if she left his house, she went and became another man's wife, and the latter husband has hated her and written her a certificate of divorce, and put it in her hand, and sent her out of his house, or when the latter husband dies who took her to be his wife, then her former husband who has sent her away is not allowed to take her back. She is to be his wife after she has been defiled, for that would be an abomination before Yahovah, and do not bring sin on the land which Yahovah your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance. So we know the house of Israel to have been divorced by Yahovah and to have gone and become another man's wife. So Yahovah's Torah expressly forbids the house of Israel from being able to come back and be Yahovah's bride again. If that is confusing to you, don't know what I'm talking about, look for, do a search for the Way Biblical Fellowship, the two houses of Israel, and then that will make sense. This is explained to us to have been part of why Yeshua had to die, that Yahovah would come in the flesh, would die, and then we could be married to the resurrected Messiah. And it kind of circumvents this law of the Torah, because once the husband has died, the wife is no longer bound by this Torah. So read Romans 7, 1-4, and check out that video. Do a search, the Way Biblical Fellowship, the two houses of Israel, if you need more information on that. Verse 5 says, when a man has taken a new wife, let him not go out into the army, nor let any matter be imposed upon him. He shall be exempt 1 year for the sake of his home, to rejoice with his wife whom he has taken. So Ols gets a year where nobody can ask anything of him, and he knows that in that year he should be at home spending time with his new wife. Verse 6 says, no one takes in pledge the lower or upper millstone, for he would be taking a life in pledge. So if someone has a millstone, that's their business. They're grinding flour. If you take a pledge of them for a debt, make sure it's not the thing by which they make their living. We also see that if someone steals something from you, they have to repay 4 times if it's a sheep, 5 times which if it is an ox, which is a beast of burden, again, to do with somebody's livelihood, and that is a more serious transgression. So we can see from this that you should never take something that somebody needs to do their job, for whatever the reason might be. But we are expressly forbidden in Torah, if you take a pledge from someone, from taking their means of making a living. As it says here, he would be taking a life in pledge. When a man is found kidnapping any of his brothers of the children of Israel and treats him harshly or sells him, then that kidnapper shall die. Thus you purge the evil from your midst. So people who misunderstand the Torah will say, well, do you think that slavery is right? And the idea that they have of slavery is not what the Bible describes as being an aved, commonly translated as servant or slave. What they have in mind is what was done in Africa, where people went and the tribal leaders sold people into slavery to Europeans, and then you get the slave trade. If that is done, that practice, then that is forbidden in the Torah. And not only that, it is the death penalty if you do that. Verse 8 says, Take heed in an outbreak of Sara'at to diligently guard to do according to all the priests, the Levites, teach you, as I have commanded them, so you shall cherish to do. Remember what Yahovah your Elohim did to Miriam on the way when you came out of Mitzrayim. So Sara'at comes as a result of not obeying leadership, not obeying men of Elohim. So people are told to diligently guard and do according to all that the priests, the Levites, teach you, because that is why the Sara'at has broken out in the first place. So you should always obey those in leadership. If you don't think that somebody has been appointed by Yahovah to their position, then maybe leave. Don't be part of that congregation. But if you do, then you should do what they say to do, because Yahovah sees your disobedience to them as disobedience to him. Verse 10 says, when you lend your brother a loan, do not go into his house to get his pledge. Stand outside and let the man to whom you lend bring the pledge out to you. And if the man is poor, do not sleep with his pledge. By all means, return the pledge to him at sundown, and he shall sleep in his own garment, and shall bless you, and it shall be righteousness to you before Yahovah your Elohim. So if you've lent somebody a loan, you don't then automatically get the right to go into their domicile and demand their pledge of them. You wait outside, you're respectful to them. And if somebody is poor and they've had to give you something for which they rely on to sleep in, then you shall not take that from them when they need it. You shall return it to them at sundown, so that he shall sleep in his own garment and shall bless you. And that is seen as righteousness before Yahovah. We see all the way throughout the writings the idea that how you treat people who are poorer than you, that you have a material advantage over, that is held to your account, that they can cry out to Yahovah if you treat them badly, for example. In verse 14 it says, do not oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy of your brothers or of the strangers who is in your land within your gates. Give him his wages on the same day, and do not let the sun go down on it, for he is poor and lifts up his soul to it, so that he does not cry out against you to Yahovah, and it shall be sin in you. So, as I was saying, these people can cry out to Yahovah against us for treating them badly. If you are employing somebody, give them their wages on that day because they need them. You might not need them. If you're an employer, you might not need that money. It might not be important to you, but we should take into account other people's circumstances. And if someone is in need of money, give it to them quickly. Don't have them waiting for you in your abundance. Verse 16 says, fathers are not put to death for their children, and children are not put to death for their fathers. Each is to die for his own sin. Read Ezekiel 18 for more on that. It's the sin of the person is accounted to the person. It's not a familial thing. The idea of generational curses are from a misunderstanding of what it means when we see people who hate Yahovah, that going to the third and the fourth generation of people make up a doctrine and believe that is talking about having generational curses, but that's not true. Your sin is your sin. Your father's sin, your grandfather's sin, is their sin. You are not punished or put under a curse for their sin. But if you hate Yahovah, you will be under the same curse that they were. But if you turn in repentance and you love Yahovah, the sin of your forefathers is not going to affect you. Again, recommend reading Ezekiel 18 because that lays that whole idea out in comprehensive detail. Verse 17 says, do not twist the justice, the mishpat, of a stranger or the fatherless. Do not take the garment of a widow. But you have remembered that you were a slave in Egypt, and that Yahovah your Elohim does ransom you from there. Therefore, I am commanding you to do this word. Okay, so these people are highlighted by Yahovah in his Torah as being people that we should show particular care to. Think of who they are, what's the commonality to them. There is some element of vulnerability. The stranger who doesn't know anyone, the fatherless or the orphan who has no parents, the widow who has no husband. We are to look after them particularly. Verse 19 says, when you reap the harvest in your field and have forgotten a sheaf in the field, do not go back to get it, let it rather be for the stranger, for the fatherless and for the widow, so that Yahovah your Elohim might bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive trees, do not examine the branch behind you. Let it be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, do not glean behind you. Let it be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. And you have remembered that you were a slave in the land of Mitzrayim. Therefore, I am commanding you to do this word. So you shouldn't seek to extract all the value that you can from something. You should leave the remainder for those who need it. I've suggested before that you could do this. If you go into a shop and you pay for something, then maybe retain the change, set it apart, and then give it to these people. That's a way that we can do this. Deuteronomy 25 verse 1 says, when there is a dispute between men, and they have come into judgment, and they have been judged, and the righteous declared righteous, and the wrongdoer declared wrong. And it has been, if the wrongdoer is to be beaten, that the judge has caused him to lie down and be beaten in his presence, with the number of blows according to his wrong. So the judge is to almost adjudicate here to make sure that the sentence is carried out correctly. 40 blows he gives him, but no more, lest he beat him with many more blows than these, and your brother is lightly esteemed before your eyes. So Yah's justice is punitive, certainly, but it's not meant in order for someone to just become nothing in your eyes. Oh, he's done this thing, give him 1,000 stripes. No, it needs to be measured. It needs to be something that will be restorative in nature, so that the person is punished appropriately, but no further, as we were looking at before. Verse 4 says, do not muzzle an ox while it is threshing. And Paul says that this is a principle that can be applied broader than that. When the workman is working, they should be able to enjoy the fruit of their work. Verse 5 says, when brothers dwell together and one of them has died and has no son, the widow of the dead man is not without to a stranger. Her husband's brother does go in to her and has taken her as wife and performed the duty of a husband's brother to her. And it has been that the firstborn son which she bears does rise up for the name of his dead brother, and his name is not blotted out of Israel. So we see more of this flavor of the fact that having a husband was something that was valuable to women in this society, certainly much more in the past than it is now. We see also that the firstborn son that she bears to her husband's brother, her dead husband's brother, is to bear the name of her original husband, so that his name is not extinguished. But if the man does not desire to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel. He does not agree to perform the duty of my husband's brother. The elders of his city have called for him and spoken to him, and he has stood and said, I have no desire to take her. Then his brother's wife has come to him in the presence of the elders and removed his sandal from his foot and has spat in his face and answered and said, thus it is done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. And that sounds very strange to us, but it's a cultural understanding. This is something that would bring shame. Notice, though, that he is called to give account of himself. The elders diligently search to see if that matter is so, and he must declare, I'm not going to take her as wife. And then this thing is done, which will bring shame upon him, that he would have this duty that he would be unprepared to do, that it would be noted in society. And in Israel, his name has been called the house of him who had his sandal removed. So he shall be known more broadly in society as the one who did this shameful thing, let's say. Verse 11 says, when men fight one with another, or with one another, and the wife of one has drawn near to rescue her husband from the hand of the one attacking him, and has put out her hand and seized him by the genitals, then you have cut off her hand, your eye does not pardon. Again, Yahovah is not looking for the severance of hands. That's not the point. The point is there is a known punishment for a crime. If you do this, you're going to have your hand cut off. So what's the message? Don't reach out and grab the genitals of someone attacking your husband. Okay, that's not acceptable before Yahovah. Maybe we can see that we shouldn't be getting involved in the arguments of others. Perhaps we could even say to not do that by, if you know that somebody has a weakness, or you know you've discovered a secret about somebody, if they're in a conflict with somebody else, maybe wheeling that out against them will be seen in the same light before Yahovah. It's certainly worth consideration. Verse 13 says, you have not in your bag differing weights, a heavy and a light. You have not had in your house differing measures, a large and a small. You have had a perfect and right weight, a perfect and right measure, so that they prolong your days on the soil which Yahovah your Elohim is giving you. For all who do these and all who do unrighteously are an abomination to Yahovah your Elohim. So we can see when you are to judge something, whether it be how much wheat you have, or whether it be a matter, you should have an honest and correct weight. For us, we have the word of Elohim. That is the honest weight by which we judge everything. We judge ourselves the same as we judge someone else. We see in the book of Romans that Paul says, look, you who look at somebody else and judge what they do is wrong before Elohim, know that you are judged by the same standard. So don't think when you do something, oh, it's okay, I didn't really mean it, or give yourself, give yourself leniency for something for which you would not give to somebody else. Judge everything the same. Don't say, well, they did this wrong. I am not prepared to forgive them. Yeah, I would expect forgiveness for me. See, think in that situation. How would I feel if I had done that? How would I expect to be received? I would know within myself. Maybe I didn't mean it. Maybe I regret doing it, and therefore I deserve forgiveness. Always have that as your weight and measure by which you judge every situation. And then finally, we read, remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you were coming out of Mitzrayim, how he met you on the way and attacked your back, all the feeble ones in your rear, when you were tired and weary, and he did not fear Elohim. Therefore it has been, in Yahovah your Elohim's given you rest from your enemies all around, in the land which Yahovah your Elohim is giving you to possess as an inheritance, that you blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under the heavens. Do not forget. And what this makes me think of is issues of forgiveness, how we are to forgive other people when they have done wrong. However, it is not sin to us to not trust somebody who has treated us shamefully in the past, who has done wrong to us in the past. It is not wrong for us to not trust that person in the future. What is incumbent upon us is that we forgive them their sin. We don't hold that against them and treat them shamefully in future because of it. But for us to remember something, i.e. to not trust that person because they have displayed themselves to not be trustworthy, that is not the same as being required to forgive somebody. Shall we pray? Father, I thank you for all of the instruction that we get from your word. I thank you that you've shown us how we can be like you, how we are to differentiate ourselves from you as well when you possess the ability to correctly judge a situation, that we do not recognize that we are without that foreknowledge, without that omniscience, Father. Thank you that you've shown us, though, how we can imitate your good characteristics towards people, how we can treat one another fairly. I pray that you would speak to people in their hearts by convicting them of what they have done that is wrong. If people have heard things in this Torah portion and thought, maybe I've treated somebody the wrong way, I pray, Father, that you would help them to restore relationships, and that you would help them to come to a knowledge of what is right in your eyes, as we know that is the best way that things can be. Help us, Father, to be forgiving of other people. Help us to treat people correctly. I pray for all of us that you would highlight to us things in your word that show us the correct way to go when we have perhaps treated people badly. Thank you for being who you are, that you are good and that you are worthy of imitation. Thank you, Father. Amen.